Matthews, and this is my final benchmark for 318 corrective exercise and my assigned test, a shoulder flexion test with the compensation of lower back arching. And so just to begin, I'll kind of go over the shoulder flexion test, the muscles that are kind of involved in that as well, what the compensation itself is, and then we'll go through the entire curriculum for corrective exercise, going through all 4 stages to make sure that we can kind of avoid this by making sure that each region is not compensating nor negatively affected. And so we'll begin with shoulder flexion test, and so I'll kind of give you a little example right here. So what this is making sure that our feet are touching the wall right here, shoulder blades are touching the wall as well. Thumbs will be up, and you'll completely just raise your arms all the way up. So the intention is we're not arching, and this is where it begins, is where people lack range of motion, they begin to compensate with other different joints. And so as I was beginning to raise my arms, people tend to arch their back by pushing their stomach forward. And so what that does is, causes lower back pain, honestly and it's all caused by shoulder instability. And so making sure, other injuries that kind of relate to that as well, shoulder impingement, tendonitis, if there's overuse that occurs, it sometimes may get tight to where the range of motion does decrease. And so when that is the case, it tends to rely on other muscles and joints for that compensation factor. And we want to make sure that, going through this entire regimen, that we make sure that we are doing it correctly, because it is important that we do not experience these when we are completing these tests. And so, like I said, as I'm raising forward, this causes your erector spinae and your pec minor and major to be incredibly overactive. On the other hand, your rhomboids, your rotator cuff, and most especially your middle and your lower trap are underactive. And so making sure we have a balance there, we typically will see our overactive muscles doing most of the work, hence why they're overactive. But because they are overactive, they tend to shorten, which that significantly decreases range of motion. And so making sure that we are integrating our underactive muscles while kind of giving a break to our overactive muscles, so making sure there's a balance between all of them so we don't experience, this regular compensation. And so the first one for the inhibitory movement that we have. So typically we do trigger point therapy, we do foam rolling, tennis ball, any sort of ball. Trigger point, you'll see this, like I said, in your overactive muscles, your erector spinae, and so you're going to do that for 30 seconds each. You're going to do it for around about 3 sets. So in total, you're going to be doing it for probably about 3 to 4 minutes, just because the region itself will be entirely tight, so not just, certain region. You want to make sure that you kind of hit every single pinpoint of that upper extremity to make sure that we hit all of those, trigger points to where that is avoided afterwards. And so our second one, so our lengthening, we will do static stretching. And so commonly what you'll see is people tend to stand like this against a wall. You can do it either way. And so we'll start here. As a progression, you can start at 90 degrees and then extend your arm all the way and kind of move your way up. And so what that looks like is, I'll do with this arm here, and you'll begin to raise your arm up, and eventually you'll be able to do that. Typically you can use a PVC pipe, but another one, let me just make sure this is good, there we go. Just rotations, and so typically this will show major tightness, but I'm gonna make sure you put that down. That is for someone that knows they're able to complete the entire rotation, but for someone that may not, we wanna make sure that we kind of set that aside as well before we get into any other major actions. And so, when performing static stretching like this, things along those lines, you're gonna be doing 15-20 seconds. Each kind of progression. So here, kind of just slowly but surely making your way up, because some people, like I said, who don't regularly participate in, activities, they tend to be a little tighter and may not exactly know what the cause may be. Sedentary lifestyle, commonly moving, picking up things, things along those lines will tend to cause upper, extremity tightness, which also shoulder rounding, things like that, bad posture can all contribute to that as well. And so this will contribute to greater range of motion. And so same thing, it'll be able to lengthen those shortened muscles. And we're going to be doing it in total, same thing, about 5 to 6 minutes, making sure that we do both arms individually though, obviously not at the same time. And so for the next one, we're going to be doing isolated strengthening and positional strengthening. And so I'm just going to move this right here. And so like I said, we are focusing on lower back arch, but making sure that we are working on our shoulder flexion. And so I have this band right here, and I'm going to hold it out just a little bit so you can see it. It's right there. And so what we would usually do for shoulder flexion, people are struggling with that, we would have them lay down and simply just, hold onto it and pull it up and pull it down and pull it up and pull it down. And so that kind of focuses on that factor of, completing that entire range of motion. And so once we use the band, then you can begin to use it with a cable row. That's what another progression will be. And so same thing, if the client can't do weight, making sure that they start off with the band and then proceeding on to the cable row as we can move it all the way down, but making sure that the weight is low enough and not as complex as we kind of explained it to be. And so I'll give you a few examples, but same thing. We're going to be doing 3 rounds of 10 just for this one. Same with the row, obviously 3 rounds, so 30 in total, but we're doing it per arm because we don't want to, be entirely dominant on one side more than the other, even though that is typically common. And so, but I will show you a few. And so, like I said, I will be laying down. I will be using the band first, kind of just pulling it up and stretching it out, pulling it back, working on that entirety of shoulder flexion as well. And so I will begin. There. Okay, so that's just 2 reps right there, and then we'll be able to, I will change the entirety of the cable row, but same thing, you can move that down. And I like this handle right here because you can move it all the way to the ground. And same thing with this, you're able to use both handles here and forward. And so, with that being said, but making sure that it's not a tricep extension, making sure that our shoulders do go all the way back and all the way forward, because that is the entirety of the motion. And so we don't want to be stagnant with our movement, so all the way backwards, all the way forward, because we want to make sure that we are keeping our back and our butt touching the wall when performing this test. Lastly, for our last portion of the curriculum, we have cable pull down. And so let me switch this out right here. And so, we have a lat pull down bar. And so starting off here and pulling all the way down, that'll be our dynamic movement. And so strengthening these muscles back here, our rhomboids, our rotator cuff, our middle and lower trapezius, pulling that down alongside with our lats, we'll be able to strengthen that. And so, like I said, we want to add more weight when we're doing our extension. So obviously starting off here, all the way forward. Obviously it's going to be a little more comfortable when we increase the weight, but making sure that it's not too heavy to where our client is not being able to do that. And so Lastly, over here, obviously it's a little low, I cannot put the bar any higher, unfortunately. And so, what this may look like is, you'll start off, I cannot go any higher. Obviously, when you sit down, you'll be here, here, and you'll pull down, here, and back up. And so the point of this motion for our dynamic movement is because when you're doing a lat pull down, you're actually squeezing your core, and so you're pushing your butt into the ground. So we're not arching this way, we're staying here. And we stay loaded and we pull ourselves down. So this is teaching us to keep our back, core, and trunk all aligned with one another, because when we start to arch our back like this, it keeps our body out of alignment, and that's where all the compensations begin. And so, like I said, for clients to avoid lower back arches and shoulder flexion tests, make sure to complete all 4 of the phases and make sure that when completing the shoulder flexion test itself, biggest tip, keep your feet against the wall, thumbs up, making sure that your back is touching the wall, shoulder blade as well, and completely just motionlessly raise your arm up. And that concludes my final benchmark. Thank you.